Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar on Content in Context. Our speakers for this topic are Rolf Krauss, CMS Practice Director at eDynamic, and Sean D'Souza, Demand Generation Practice Director, also at eDynamic. In today's presentation, we'll cover challenges with content marketing, what is context-driven marketing, how to get there, and what is unified customer engagement. At the conclusion of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. And now, over to Rolf Krauss from eDynamic.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rolf Krauss. I'm the CMS Practice Director for eDynamic, and I have with me today Sean D'Souza.
Oh, hi. I'm Sean D'Souza, and I manage the demand generation practice at eDynamic. Thanks, Rolf.
And we're going to start off this presentation with just a short, quick overview of eDynamic before we get going. And just give you a little background of who we are before we launch into the meat of our presentation today. So we're a digital consultancy. We've been around since 1999, and we've had a strong focus around content management and a variety of other platforms that kind of fit into that ecosystem. So that includes things like marketing automation, search, of course, CRM, and some other secondary and tertiary platforms that kind of plug into the overall ecosystem. And where we're really focused on as an organization is around helping our customers acquire and engage with their customers. So customer acquisition through the interactive solutions that we develop really is our focus. And we look toward the technology platforms that we work with and the strategy and the approaches that we wrap around these platforms to really get the marketers into that next level of providing, relevant and personalized engagement that drives both acquisition and, at the core, just conversion when we use the various digital channels that we use. Having done a lot of work with a variety of customers around the world in a variety of industries, we've had broad exposure in helping organizations get there. So to continue, we'll move on to the next screen. And it will provide some discussions around content-based marketing, what it is, what the challenges are. I know there's been a lot of discussion over the last few years about, content is king, and we want to talk about how that notion is changing, and the new notion, or kind of the emerging notion of context-driven marketing, how that is working in unison with the content that you have, and then how we get there, how we actually take this new approach, this emerging approach, and put it into action. And so that will be the real focus of today's presentation. So I'm going to hand this back over to Sean, and Sean's going to take us through some information around the challenges of content-based marketing.
Thanks, Rolf. Camille, can you put up a poll? So before we start, we'd just like to ask a question of the audience. Camille, thanks. Can you close that poll now? Are you able to share the results, or can you push that poll out, or not?
Yeah, Sean, I've got the results here, and the poll is interesting in the fact that people responded, and of the three things, quality of content won out as 50%. Second was the quantity quantity of content being one of the biggest challenges, and actually coming in as a far third is too many channels. So that's great information, and it just gives us all a perspective of the fact that many of us are in the same boat, dealing with the same challenges. Now,
yeah, that's actually great, because I think what we are going to talk about very much is in line with what all of you feel and where you are in your kind of journey in content marketing. So sort of to kind of look at what the state of content marketing is and what we are all as marketers trying to do, we'll share some data points over here with you to kind of bring home the point about what the challenges are with content marketing. So there's a lot of conversation about content is king and it's the fuel for marketing automation. So I actually went to Wikipedia and kind of looked up what's the actual definition for content marketing, and I found that what they said was content marketing is an umbrella term that encompasses all marketing formats that involve the creation or the sharing of content for the purpose of engaging customers and prospects. So I thought that was really nice, especially the caveat being engaging customers and prospects. Content marketing has been around for a long time. If you typically look back at even the old advertorials, even if you look at propaganda and messaging coming from governments, this thing's been around for a long time. But in the last few years, what we have seen, especially with the emergence of online channels like the web, email, and especially with social media, content marketing has become a real focus for marketers. And the question to ask ourselves is, why is it so important? Why is it so popular? The Content Marketing Institute, along with Marketing Profs, did a survey, and they found that 71% of marketers are doing more of it than a year ago. And entire departments are now being set up, focused on content. You've got VPs of content. You've got communications teams now that are devoting all their time to just churning out content. And the percentage of people that are actually doing less is just a fraction at about 2%. So why is that? So, I think everyone believes in that content marketing essentially is the driver, it's the motivator, that by educating the customer, you're going to result in your brand's recognition as a thought leader and industry expert. Finally, that's going to help with enabling customers to engage with you more. And essentially, what all this boils down to is that the biggest tangible business benefit for content marketing is its ability to drive awareness, drive leads, and ultimately drive revenue for the organization. So that's the big, I guess, motivation for why we are spending so much time with content marketing. This is a slide again from the Marketing Profs Content Marketing Institute survey, which they did last year, and they found that more and more people are now spending a lot of money in content marketing. So to the point about departments, about the focus on all the different channels in which content needs to be developed, we're finding that almost 33% of the marketing budget is being spent on delivering content, which is quite huge, considering that there's a lot of other activities that need to be put into that marketing budget as well. So what does this mean? The challenge that we are seeing and what all the data is showing us is that while there's more and more noise happening in the market as more and more marketers are generating content across numerous channels, the customer, on the other hand, which again is you and I, the customer is also getting more savvy, and they're becoming more selective in what content to consume and what to act upon. So as we as marketers are spending more and making more noise in the marketplace across different channels and getting really granular in what channels we use and what channels we don't, on the flip side, the customers are also pulling back. And this is a ComScore data point which shows how, with advertising essentially, how people are responding less online to offers and to content than a few years ago. This slide talks about buyer behavior in a different light, which is a few years ago, the seller had control. If you were a salesperson, you had control over the sales process, and you'd take someone from attention and interest down to action, and along the way you'd be the person, or if you were the salesperson, you'd be pulling out these data sheets and these price sheets and these testimonials and so on. But you're not in control anymore. The buyer is in control, and the buyer is dictating what they want to see and what they don't want to see. And most often, the buyer has already engaged either with your organization or with the content that your organization or someone else has put out, and they've already engaged with that, and they actually come to you or to your company and submit the contact us form or request for contact at a point when they are very actively engaged in the buying cycle. And that's a key point, which is because they're in control, how are you going to essentially target them, engage them, and give them the relevant messaging or communication at a point where they are in that process. So while people are not, while customers are pulling back and not responding, what's also happening is it's impacting revenue. So at the top of the funnel, if you're looking at a typical sales funnel, at the top of the funnel, so you've got all these activities being done. The response rates for those activities are very poor. A vast majority of them are less than a percentage, and the second big group that you'd see there is still under 5%. So all that money that you're spending is not really giving you the throughput that you would like. On the right-hand side, there's a slide that talks about inquiries to MQLs. MQLs, or Marketing Qualified Leads, is a term that Sirius Decisions uses. They're an analyst firm that targets the B2B market. An MQL is someone who's qualified and who can be put into an active process towards purchase. And if you see that the conversion rate from inquiry to a qualified lead is very low. So the throughput, even in terms of the quality of the information that's coming in through all these various channels, through all this content that you're putting out, is very low, is very poor, which means that you as a marketer are forced to actually flood the waterfall at the top with a lot more horsepower in terms of content, in terms of expenditure, with all the different channels that you're using. So essentially what the message here is that it's not truly equating to conversion. Now marketers actually know this because this is another graph that the Content Institute did, and they found that even while marketers are spending a lot of money on all these different pieces of content, and they're putting it out on blogs and on social media and doing webinars like this one, the confidence level of how effective some of those channels are is very low. And you will see that the percentage goes up as the channels get newer and newer. So the in-person events and the newsletters and things like that way, they still have a higher confidence level with those, because those are the ones that are driving performance, driving leads into the sales funnel. And that becomes a challenge, because if they're not confident in this, how are they going to prove this up to leadership, and how are they going to get the money that they need to drive revenue, to drive those channels, to create the content necessary to drive those channels? So that's the problem. So one of the biggest challenges, like what you said in the poll, was that the quality of the content. Producing engaging content is a huge challenge. And then producing enough content. So how much content do you need to produce, and how engaging does it need to be because as we are seeing, the content that we are putting out at this point doesn't seem to be working well enough or hard enough to justify the expenditures and the investment that's being made in that exercise. So the question is, what content do you need to drive engagement? And why is engagement so important is because this is a slide from Marketing Sherpa, which shows that out of your lead gen, there's about 70% of it that does not turn into an immediate sale, and it needs a lot of nurturing, and it's a good opportunity that is worth nurturing. So what that means is that you've got to spend time with the right content to be able to nurture that 70% in order to be able to convert them at some point. So there's a huge necessity which all marketers recognize, which is we have to develop content. We have to move people from that top of the funnel kind of awareness down to consideration and then to purchase. And the only way to do that is through the use of good content. So now that we have seen the data points, what are what's the need for context-driven marketing? And because content marketing is not as effective as we have seen, what we are saying is that what you need to do is drive content but within context. So what is context-driven marketing? The way we look at it is we've grabbed this slide from Forrester, or this graphic from Forrester. It's about engaging customers and engaging them right through the buying cycle at every point, from top of the funnel awareness down to action, and then post-action once they're a customer to convert them and make them advocates. So how do you do that? It is with offering them messaging that's real-time, right-time, and it is the right messaging, so it is in context of where they are, where their mindset is, and at what level they are in the buying cycle. And what's the value of doing this? It's huge. If you look at this report from the Aberdeen Group that compared kind of best in class with industry average companies, if you are able to use personalization, use relevant messaging, use timely communications, you can generate 2 to 3 times the level of engagement with your prospective customers, and that means that you can typically gain a 59% higher increase in the performance right down to your bottom line. And if you look at how that compares with the next group, which is the industry average group, so forget about even the laggards, the industry average group, their performance increase is just 9%. So right down to your bottom line, to your revenue, there's a huge benefit in the ability to be relevant, to personalize, and to have timely messaging to your audience. And one of the things that's needed to be able to do this is to be able to have a holistic view. So without that view, you will be doing things on a blog, you will be doing things through webinars, you'll be doing things on your website that might all be excellent, but if they're not in tune with each other and you have these siloed systems, then you're not in sync with where your customer is. So your customer might land up on the website, they might see some other information, and they will go off to look at what your competitor is offering. So having that single view across the platform, having processes in place to be able to aggregate and look at the customer in one view, look at their behavior, look at their digital footprint, and then figure out what messaging, what communications are appropriate to send through any of those channels is what is needed to be able to do this, which is do very effective context-driven marketing. To go more into this, I'm going to pass you back to Rolf, and Rolf's going to take you through the steps of at least our approach to how we do contextual-driven marketing. Rolf, back to you.
Great, thank you. So I think that there are some key points that Sean had focused on that we're going to carry forward with us. And one of those points is around the fact that when we have our sales funnel, we begin to fill that funnel with people. There's a couple things we want to do. One, we want to accelerate people through that sales funnel. So we want to shorten or compress the time it takes to get people through the funnel. The second is, as one of the slides that Sean had demonstrated, is that, you know, it's very likely that 70% of the people that drop into your funnel never get to any further phases in any reasonable amount of time. They kind of stick up there at the very top level of the funnel, and you're not able to move them forward. And that's what we typically would call leakage. You know, people move forward and then they get forgotten about because it's too much effort and cost to move them forward with people on the phone and other mechanisms. So what we're looking at here is a variety of tools that enable us to kind of address those problems, okay? Moving people through the funnel in a shorter period of time, taking the people that have kind of sat there in the funnel and begin to nurture them and begin to, you know, identify where they will fall into in the future. You know, what's their disposition? You know, are they going to be a buyer, or do we completely remove them from the funnel? Then the other component that Sean talked about was around the notion of getting a complete or holistic view of the customer. We believe that the notion of context really is about speaking as relevantly to the customer as possible. And that is a cross-section of several things. One, speaking to them at where they are in the buying cycle. So we looked at the buying cycle model that I believe Forrester had. We use a model ourselves. Serious Decisions uses a model. They're all very similar. The notion that a person comes in many cases, they don't even know they have a problem, right? And as we move them down the funnel or down the buying cycle, then they say, you know, I've got a problem, looking for a solution. Now I'm comparing vendors and solutions out there. So there's a need to address them of where they are there. Then there's this whole notion of segmentation, speaking to them as an individual, what role they're in, what industry they're in. And we begin to overlay those, and that really creates this notion of context that we at eDynamic have been working with many customers. And that notion of context allowing us to create, in the end, relevant and very targeted communication. We've seen that acceleration through the buying cycle and through the sales funnel, if you will. And we've also seen the ability to pull people that were at the top of the funnel through in an automated manner toward the end of the funnel. And so what I'm about to discuss here is the approach that we take to make that happen. And it's really broken up in two parts. The first part is focused around kind of a strategy and approach that we take to make that happen. The second part, number 4 there, is the automation of that. That's really employing the platforms, the CMS, the marketing automation tools, the CRM, making them work together to drive that. So, but what we've learned, you know, many people have these tools sitting within their organizations. They will have a CMS, a Sitecore, a Day, a SDL Tridian, you know, some of the great names out there, and they'll have Eloqua or Marketo or something else in Salesforce. But the reality is those systems don't work together to create this unified communication and across all these different channels. Email, could be SMS, could be web. So where we start with is understanding how we get the context to get the right content created. So now we're back to content again. And then once we have the content, we understand the context of when we need to communicate what content to these people, then we automate that process. So let's start with that. And let's look at a couple things. One, we have this notion of this closed loop engagement cycle. So an engagement cycle, you can think of it as a corkscrew as it works its way through the buying cycle. You know, we go through a loop, we send information out to people, they respond to that, and then we look at that information that we get back from them, we analyze it, and then we send information back to them via email, via the web experience that, again, is aligned with what they told us about themselves. We begin to characterize the prospect, so understanding, as I said, the buying cycle, segmentation, and then we develop the content that supports that. So as we take a look at that, excuse me while this slide is taking a moment to move forward. Sean, could you help me out here? That slide is not moving forward for me. Thank you. So here we talk about the closed-loop engagement cycle, and it's really about starting off delivering the messages, okay, and then once we deliver the message, getting the reaction from people. So imagine now we have a website, and we provide people the opportunity to take action on various offers on the website. Maybe one targeting, let's say if you're in a specific technology industry, you may have two different vertical markets that you're trying to cater to. And you've got different thought leadership papers, white papers that you have on perhaps law firms is one market that you're pursuing, and trucking might be another market that you're pursuing. And you make them available on your website. Soon you'll see a pattern based on how people engage with those offers on your page. And that's the information that we're able to take and then act on. So we begin to analyze how people relate to the content that's coming to them, regardless of channel. And then once we have that, we begin to then respond to people. We look at this as a digital dialogue, where we're actually communicating with people as we would in a dialogue. And then we respond to them via email, via the web. Perhaps the next web visit, the next session that they have on our website will then cater either to law firms or to trucking. And we begin to align ourselves. Now that's a very simplistic example. It can get much more sophisticated than that, but that's the general notion. Now taking this engagement cycle, but now we repeat that multiple times as we make our way down the buying cycle. So they come to us, they may have heard about us, but they don't know much about it. They don't even know really how to qualify or characterize the problem they have. So we might start with that. Once they understand the problem, then they look at, well, what's the best solution? So moving them down the buying cycle is something that's going to be very important. Sean, would you move me forward, please? Okay, so our approach here is so looking at the buying cycle, we again take a very simple kind of 5 to 6 stage approach where we, first of all, have need recognition. People are out there looking for information, then they evaluate their opportunities, and then they finally come to a purchasing decision. We found this basic approach fairly universal when we want to engage with one of our customers. We begin to talk to their sales team, we begin to talk to their marketing team, begin to say, yeah, absolutely, this is very similar. Sometimes we have a few more stages in here, but typically where we see us engaging with the customers, once we get to information search, what that typically means, they already know they've got a problem, so they finally make their way to Google and they type in something that they believe is going to lead them to a solution. And then hopefully, if we've done SEO correctly and all the other things, it'll drive them to content, whether that's our website, whether that be a slide deck on SlideShare, or maybe a thought leadership piece that's out on the web somewhere. And then with something like evaluate alternatives, again, those mechanisms, those channels, whether it was SlideShare or maybe a blog that they read something about that about our company, again, those can take them back to our website where they begin to engage with us. So as we look to the next slide, we can see that the approach that we take is really a multi-step approach, one in which we begin to understand the buying cycle. We find this to be fundamental to the success of the approach that we have. So understanding the buying cycle. Then on that buying cycle, we begin to overlay segmentation. The segmentation may vary depending who you're selling to. But, you know, typical things that we found are almost universal are things like industry. You know, whether we work with a law firm, whether we work with a software company, those organizations cater to different industries. So that's one definite segment. The other is at a more individual level where we target individual buyer types within organizations. So that could be maybe if you're in a financial services firm, you are trying to target someone that's responsible for expense management, or someone that's the CFO or the controller, someone that is in purchasing. So again, we begin to target based on the specific audience that you go after. Then the next step is mapping the messages. And this goes back to creating content, but not creating content against perhaps personas, which we believe are very general and are just kind of a snapshot in time, but creating content for this dynamic experience, meaning that we know the mindset of that individual is going to change from the time they come to our website the first time to hopefully the time they come to a buying decision. And as that change occurs, we need to change how we engage with them based on the content that gets presented. So mapping the messages not only to the buying cycle, perhaps the roles that are relevant within that buying cycle, and then also the industry and perhaps some other segmentation parameters that are specific to your market. So if you look on the next slide, we'll start talking about, you know, getting into more detail on the segmentation parameters. You're going to have a lot more detail as you work through that. And this is a very common marketing approach, you know, marketing segmentation exercise that people go through. So as we move on to the next slide, we talk about mapping the messages. So we go through the buying cycle. We've identified and overlaid the segments onto the buying cycle. And we finally get to a point where we're able to define our messaging. Now, in many cases, organizations already have a lot of content. And so maybe it's a matter of repurposing some of the existing content you have, kind of boiling it down into more granular components, right, that you might associate or even shape for these specific target groups. On this slide, it's very interesting. We've got this diagram here, and it is an actual diagram that we use for a customer in the financial services world, a large credit card company. And in this case, they had a very clear audience, senior manager, finance staff, purchasing, buying cycle, really only 3 areas that they touch on in the buying cycle that their digital platform would engage with. And then the verticals. They only wanted to focus on 5 verticals, including kind of the generic customer, the unknown customer. Then the other thing, we took it to another level. We talked about pain points and motivators, which is another important component. It's not really segmentation, but it is that next step of what is it that we're going to speak to at, again, each phase of the buying cycle. As people move through the buying cycle, and again with different audiences, roles within the organization, they're going to have different pain points. They're going to have different motivations. So again, we begin to map this out in a matrix, and we begin to write content against that map. So as we move forward, and yep. So real quickly, in summary here, understanding the buying cycle, I think, is very key to the success of this whole approach. Going through that exercise, getting marketing and sales, sometimes I know it's difficult, getting them in the same room, and getting them to speak about their perception of how the customer thinks about your organization, about your product, how they move through their mindset. Going through segmentation exercises, okay, and then finally, developing that content map that is against those key buckets that we've defined there. I think that's really the whole approach that we take. Now we're going to talk about when we go through this, how do we automate that? So we're going to move to the next section, and I think we've got one more poll here that we can put up very quickly. And this poll, we're interested in, what platforms you're currently using, maybe the main platform that you're currently using, and why you came to this webinar. What is it? What platform did you have in the back of your mind? Give it about 10 more seconds, and then we'll close that out. All right. I think we got a reasonable sampling here, and I'll give you the results verbally here. Out of the 5, actually CRM took the winnings here with 29%. So many of you came into this with the notion of CRM. As you leave this, you might be looking more broadly at other components of your digital platform. 24% of you came in thinking about marketing automation, which is highly relevant to our discussion today. Then 14% to CMS, 19% analytics, and 14% in community. In actuality, all of those components fit into the ecosystem that we typically work with when we create these automated engagement or acquisition systems. So looking forward, now we're going to touch on that number 4 piece, which is how to automate that. And when we move on to the next slide, we begin to talk about what's necessary to achieve this multi-channel engagement. But many of us do multi-channel engagement now, but the difference is how to get all of these channels to work together with the same messages at the same time across the channel. So regardless of if the customer is getting an email, going to your website, the experience and the message is the same. And we look at it from this perspective. Typically, content management, CMS, CRM, and marketing automation work together to create this unified engagement platform, as we call it. The key thing here is a common customer context. Now, that common customer context is really about the profile of the customer. As we gather information from analytics, and whether it's an external analytics application like Omniture or Unica that you might have, or something that's built in, let's say Day or Sitecore may have built-in analytics, or analytics that come from the marketing automation system as you instrument landing pages that are out there. All of these things need to come together and inform this common customer context. So one of the key things that we look at doing is providing some way to get these systems to talk together and work together to have this common context. So as we move to the next slide, the key thing here is taking the content map that we have and the content that we've developed and start working with the systems to get these systems to do this in an automated manner. What we mean by that is that these systems, both marketing automation and the contemporary CMS systems, they all have rules-based systems built in. This allows us to have that dynamic experience that we're looking for. And if we can move this next slide, we'll take a look at what that might look like as it works together. So in this slide, we've got a variety of systems working together. So we've got the web CMS and that kind of that pink layer. We've got marketing automation. Then below, we've got this unified customer profile and behavior data. So there's both explicit and implicit information that we capture. So unified customer profile is typically many of the things that get captured in a CRM. When a person fills out a form and they say, I'm in this industry, I'm interested in buying in 6 months, that's profile information. But then there's this information that we capture behind the scenes. If they are clicking around a landing page that is hosted by your marketing automation system and they're clicking certain links, that informs us what they're interested in if they click one link or the other, if they're downloading one piece of information or the other. The same applies to the content management system. And what occurs is that we're able to capture these data points, if you will, and bring them together in a holistic system. Now, in many cases, we will use a CRM. Some cases, we may use the marketing automation system. In all cases, we want to have one view of the customer from a behavioral perspective and also from a profile perspective. This then allows us to write presentation rules. What content gets shown when and to whom and under what conditions. And we write those rules against the information we have. Okay? And so in many cases, here's another view of this, completely context-driven multi-channel experience. And in this case, we've got landing pages, we've got email, we've got the web page managed by the CMS, we've got the CRM, and then we've got this common prospect profile, if you will. And so a lot of the work that we've done, we do a lot of work with Equate, we do work with a variety of other systems, including Marketo, Neolane, and so on, and as well as doing a lot of work across various CMS platforms, including Sitecore and Day and SDL and so on. And with that, with these contemporary platforms, we're able to bring these systems together. The nice thing, the results of this, is that when someone actually comes to your site and engages with your site, makes some, navigates through it and allows us to collect some behavioral information, the next time they get an email, we have the opportunity of personalizing that email as part of maybe a multi-step nurturing campaign, personalizing that email to that person based on what we've learned on the website. Okay? They click through on that email that takes them to another landing page, perhaps on the website, or a landing page hosted by the marketing automation system, and we go through that process again. We begin to learn, and then we respond to what we've learned by, again, driving the content that's relevant. So we begin to think about what state are they in the buying cycle. Oh, what role are they? What industry are they? And then we begin to push that content. It's really very formulaic once we get the infrastructure in place and we've gone through kind of the strategy exercises of laying this out. But once we have that in place, then the marketer actually has control to develop those rules themselves. So let's go on to the next slide. So one of the things that we'd like to do is invite each of you to come to a demo. Now, we don't have time to do a demo today, but we will be reaching out to each of you and asking you if you'd be interested in seeing a demo. And these are one-on-one demos. And what we have done is actually done the integration between Sitecore and Equate. And in that situation, we have the information that's captured by Sitecore's online marketing suite, for those that might be familiar with it. It's a built-in analytics tool we're able to take that information and inform Equate what's going on. Equate then turns around and sends an email as part of a campaign that is relevant to the customer. And again, then that cycle occurs over and over again. Then based on what we have captured in Equate as well, we can inform Sitecore. And then all of this is then connected with Salesforce.com in most cases, or even Microsoft Dynamics or other CRM solutions. So we'd love to have the opportunity to show that to you. And you may see an email coming from us here in the near term. And feel free to reach out to us if you want to see that.
Thanks, Rolf. I think it's question and answer time. So I'm sure there's, we've seen a few questions pop in the question box. So do you think we can start looking at some of these questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So one question came in from Carl, and he said, CMS, CRM, MAP, what if one of these three platforms is horribly broken?
Which one is horribly broken?
Well, if one of them. So, so the content management system, the CRM application, and the marketing automation platform, when we talk about syncing them all together, what if one of the three is broken? How would we fix it?
Right. I think the first thing that needs to be done, if we're getting ready for a marathon, the last thing we want to do is run on a sore knee. So it's very clear that we're going to have to take a step back and, as an organization, and whoever the partner is that will be working with you, and take a look at that and get that resolved first.
Okay. He mentioned it's the content management system.
Got it. So definitely, if it's a content management system, we're going to have to take a look at whether or not it can be resolved with the existing platform you have, and if so, then we need to build a roadmap and a plan around that before we actually look at creating an integrated digital marketing platform. Because if any one of these systems isn't working up to par, then the whole system is not going to be working very well.
Okay. The other question is, what is the process and the timeline to kind of get one of these things set up?
That's a great question. And the thing is that it can vary from organization to organization. I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear. But typically, we engage fairly quickly with an organization to kind of get them on the road of thinking about how to go through this process. And we have developed workshops around that to take them through the approach and the strategy, the buying cycle exercises, the segmentation exercises, all the way down to defining the content buckets, if you will, in the content matrix. And at that point, sometimes you will engage with an agency that will be writing the content. You may have internal writers. You may have others that will get involved then that we would work with and guide to help develop that content correctly. Once that's done, then we begin to look at a roadmap that might take months to roll out and over a period of time where we bite off pieces that we know are manageable and that can drive the most value for the organization. So one might be, the integration between marketing automation and CMS. And, if there may be some other things that are even more important, maybe your marketing automation is not yet integrated with CRM. Perhaps we need to look at that first. So it's about going through the exercise, identifying what you want to accomplish in a roadmap, and then taking it out. So the workshops typically take anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to maybe up to 6 weeks. And then developing a roadmap definitely can take a few months to execute on that.
Great. Camia, can you line up the questions, because I know there's quite a few coming in?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, what is involved in setting up a context-driven strategy? What are some of the first steps we should take to get going?
Okay, so I can start answering that, and I think Rolf can take it from there. So what we covered initially is a process, And as Rolf talked about the buying process, there's an exercise that we do typically where we look at your CRM data, we look at your data that's sitting in your marketing automation platform. We talk to your salespeople. We figure out what that buying cycle looks like, and then we go deeper and build out a content map for you. So that's the first exercise, and that's totally part of a process that we follow. After that, it's taking that information and then translating it into the platforms. So we build out the integration, as Rolf had said, and then we build the business rules that help the platforms then talk to each other to give you that one view of the customer. And that's what drives the context-driven kind of marketing activity. Rolf, do you need to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it, definitely.
Okay. Camia, any more questions?
Yeah. Yeah, there's one more. It says, what are some of the tools we can use to automate these processes?
Rolf, I think you should take this one.
Yeah, so I think we actually covered that at a high level anyway in terms of automating these processes. Analytics is becoming a core part of all of this. Whether you have a tool that acts as an umbrella, let's say Omniture or one of these enterprise class analytics tools that sits across a variety of platforms and digital systems that you have, or it is analytics that is specific to the platform. Let's say the CMS may have built-in analytics. Obviously, marketing automation typically has built-in analytics. And then using that information to inform what we need to do, meaning creating the context of that customer. So in terms of, where we start, what technologies we need to look at, I would say that to make all of this can be done manually, but it's a tremendous amount of work. What we want to do is get these campaigns to run in an automated fashion. So that requires marketing automation or some email automation software that has those capabilities. Then we look at CMS that has the ability to do personalization, that is driven off of rules or some other mechanism. And then we look at analytics, whether, like I said, built-in or external, that can inform us as to what people are doing and begin to capture behaviors. I think those are very key to moving this process forward. Getting those key pieces in place will allow us to automate things. I see one other question. I want to make sure we don't miss that. And that one person asked, what's the best way to get a profile snapshot of a site visitor? Is it to track their activity on the site or get them to fill out a survey? And I think it's a great question because it's insightful. Because one track, which is to track their activity on the site, definitely provides you a snapshot over that session, okay? And that's what we would call implicit information, implicit behavior. Whereas getting them to fill out a survey is very much along the lines of information that we're going to capture, profile information, that eventually gets pushed into the repository like CRM. In terms of getting a snapshot, I would say either way gets you a snapshot, but provides you with different information. So from a best practices perspective, we look at utilizing both mechanisms to capture information about that user. So every time the user is on the website or a landing page, we're capturing information behind the scenes, where they go, how much time they spend on things, and that will inform us their level of interest. At the same time, we may use a progressive profile where we get them to answer questions. Could be through a poll, could be something fun like that, or actually through a form where we get them to respond. And every time they come, they provide us with a bit more information about themselves. So again, from a best practices perspective, both mechanisms should be used.
Camia, do you want to ask another? No. There's one question that also came up about, what is it that we are selling? And I think what we are selling is the whole process. So I think you need to see a little more, which is why we're going to be doing, we're going to be holding one-on-one demos of exactly how all of this translates in reality. So how do the platforms talk to each other? How do we get them displaying dynamic information? To the question earlier about the profile, it's a combination of both, as Rolf said. So how does that interaction happen? What are the types of poll questions or progressive profiling questions that you ask on the site based on information in the marketing automation platform and so on? Is something that I think you guys would be very interested in looking at in actually how it plays out with the platform interactions. So we will be sending out an email after this webinar. So feel free to book that session with us, and we'd be happy to walk you through that demo. Cami, do we have time for one last question?
Yes, we do have one question. I would like to take that up. And the question is, our website has a lot of content, and we need to implement a CMS and marketing automation to start delivering it. Do we have to start over from the scratch, or can a CMS use our existing material?
Rolf, you're the CMS expert.
Yeah, I think utilizing existing material is always the best place to start. Now, whether it is, I think any time you're moving on to a CMS, one of the things that occurs in content migration, now we're kind of moving into that subject, is that from a best practices, we always want to evaluate what content we have and the quality of that content before we go through the effort of actually putting it into a CMS. I think there needs to be a process wrapped around that as part of the migration where the content is vetted. We make sure that it's still relevant content. We make sure that the quality is there, that it's timely. Some of your content may be out of date. And then, only then will we really think about taking that and then moving that to the CMS. Otherwise, it becomes a very expensive process of managing content that has little value to our visitors. So,
okay, we just have about a minute left. So I think we can close this. If there's any other questions, feel free to ask them. We'll provide our contact information in an email, as well as you can find us on our website. So feel free to reach out to us.
And one question that I saw, Sean, people were asking where they could get access to the presentation.
Right. So, Kamya, you want to take that up and then wrap up?
Sure. So everybody would be receiving a webcast recording and an insightful white paper on unified customer engagement shortly, and we will also be sending out an email with a link to register for the demo soon after the webinar ends.
Great. Well, we want to thank everyone that was on the call today. I know it was quite a bit of information to go through, and we have to tell you, this really is exciting for the people that are left on the webinar. We're doing some exciting things with a variety of companies in different industries, and once you see the demo and understand how that works, we'll be able to help you relate it to the systems that you have in place right now. And if you're looking toward, what does it take for me to get to those best practices, we can work with you there as well. Love to have a chance to speak with you and understand the challenges that you're facing. So again, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Rolf. Thanks, Kamya, and thanks to everyone who joined. We're now going to end this webinar. Thank you.